bottom line, I am essentially in the same place on Will Levis that I was in June, in May, in April, which is, I don't know. Welcome in to the Hot Read Podcast for Friday, August the 23rd. I'm your host, Easton Freeze, director of published content here at BroadwaySportsMedia.com. We're also brought to you by the 440 Podcast Network. You can follow me on social media at Easton Freeze. I am joined, as always, by producer JT, who you can follow on social media at JT_Runke. JT almost made it to the end of the work week. How are you?
I'm good. It's almost the end of the work week, but you know what did end today? Titans training camp. It was officially the last practice, confirmed by Brian Callahan. What a whirlwind of the
best of times. It was the worst of times. Yeah,
right.
It was. It sure was one of all the training camps. It sure was one of them.
It sure was one of the training camps. We had so much fun along the way. I think this is if you go past the training camp, I think it's one that'll go down in the Titans Twitter and podcast space history books for sure.
Oh, well, when you put it that way, sure. I can't disagree with that. A couple of notes on that. One, it is exciting to end training camp because we know what comes after training camp. Real stuff. We've gone through free agency and the draft and the dog days of summer, and now through training camp. That only leaves us with real football to be played the rest of the year. So that is super duper exciting. And then, yeah, I would say that this training camp, for my money, will go down as one of the most overwhelmingly positive camps the Tennessee Titans have ever had. That's part of the territory of hiring a new coach, typically speaking. Now, there are some true dumpster fires. We already saw Urban Meyer's regime falling apart at this point that season. So the good news is things haven't fallen apart yet for Brian Callahan. He has enjoyed a nice, long, healthy honeymoon period, and it's on to the real stuff. He has been just kind of to review. I think this is a good chance to put a button on Brian Callahan, his introductory offseason. He has been fantastic. I have been in love with the way that he handles those of us in the media, just in terms of this has nothing to do with the football product. Divorcing Brian Callahan, the person we have to work with on a professional basis, and Brian Callahan, the head coach. In terms of a person that we have to work with professionally, he has been a 10 out of 10, no notes, fantastic. Have loved the fireside chats that he has done, have loved how open and honest he's been, have loved his willingness to answer in-depth questions, things that frankly were on all of our minds in previous years, and we often kept them to ourselves because when you tried them, you learned the hard way why you should probably keep them to yourself. I've asked a lot more scheme questions this summer than I ever would have in previous years because I know I'm going to get good answers on them, and he seems to respect that kind of thing. So that's been fantastic. I don't have any indication besides that one little blip on our radar where he made an offhand comment about things being negative. I've not had any indication besides that one instance that if and when things go bad, and it's the NFL, something's going to go bad eventually for you. The best of teams, the worst of teams, you face real adversity. I don't get any indication he's going to clam up in that way. So that is super exciting and well done to him. And I wish the best to him and his team because it is easier to be positive and give a lot of information when you're good at football. So we got a lot to cover today, JT, a lot of ground before we get to the Titans' third and final preseason game, which is this Sunday afternoon. Again, I think folks are going to probably turn their TVs on Saturday night and say, where's the game? It's on Sunday at 1 p.m. local time. The Titans will be in New Orleans, their first road game of the Brian Callahan tenure. He told us on Wednesday he's looking forward to a quote-unquote road environment. He hopes that it's the loudest preseason environment you can possibly ask for. New Orleans, a notoriously difficult place to play on the road because they're going on the road week 1 to Chicago when a real game is being played. And I don't know if folks have been paying attention to any of the NFL goings-on in Chicago this offseason, but I'd imagine they're going to be pretty loud in that stadium on game day when they get to unveil their new future Hall of Famer, if you ask the folks up in Chicago. So that's going to be something they're going to have to deal with out of the gate. We're primarily today going to talk about some notes from camp, the last 2 practices. I went to Wednesday. JT went to today's. It sounds like JT, and not to spoil your thunder here, it sounds like I got the better offensive day of the 2. Some things we have to talk about from today. And once we go through those camp notes, JT and I are essentially going to provide our final revisions to our 53-man roster projections And I say final. We may, after the preseason game, make 1 or 2 final changes on Sunday. This is one of 2 episodes we have left before we know for sure the roster, right? Yes.
I'm just gonna go out and say mine is final. I sent mine
What you
for
said
submission.
on Tuesday?
Yeah,
Then you're a better
no.
man than I.
I made my revisions today.
Okay.
Because Nick Suss over at the Tennessean was asking for all of the Titans media's official 53. I made my revisions today and I sent it in. So my homework's done. I'm done. So
okay. Well, congratulations on being done. I've procrastinated. I need to get that to Nick, and I'm honestly going to just kind of talk through it today. I don't have a final list in front of me, but I have some thoughts on some changes from Tuesday's episode. And then, more importantly, talking about, as Brian Callahan said in his press conference today, there are, what do you say, 4 or 5? Is that the number he used? 4 or 5 spots up for grabs at this point, which is pretty standard. And I think it's a healthy thing for the coaches to keep an open mind all the way through to the end of preseason action, because just like in the actual NFL, where what you do early on doesn't really matter if you screw up at the end of the season, finishing strong matters in this league. And so guys finishing strong and showing up in quote unquote clutch time to earn their jobs, I think that is something that you should be looking for. And so we'll talk about which guys are on the bubble, who's currently sitting in, who's currently sitting out, maybe who needs to have a massive showing this weekend, as massive a showing you can have, I guess, in the preseason to solidify their chances. All of that and more in today's episode. But first, if you're with us live on this Thursday afternoon taping, we appreciate you being here. Do us a couple of favors. First of all, if you are not watching with us on YouTube, head on over to Broadway Sports Media's YouTube page and watch there. Follow us while you're there. Hit thumbs up while you're there. All of those things. And join the comment section over there with Jake and Derek and Alex, all of these guys.
Jake's not allowed to say anything today. I saw what you said about my facial hair in a football show's chat.
What did he say?
He gets a ban. He gets a ban in our chat.
All right, mods need to ban Jake. Get him out of here. Yeah, what did he say? I didn't see. How did you come up in a football show? That's so
I don't
rude.
know.
You
he said your dad beard looked really good, unlike whatever JT's got going on there, which rude.
Wow.
But goes to show that I'm so.
Derek says, cook that fraud. Yeah, Jake, how dare you? Jake in the comments does say, can we get some rip Zachs in the chat? That's fair. We did the Zach Lions farewell. I filled in for Zach on today's episode of A Football Show with Braden, and there was at the front end, a 6-minute clip of
in
Braden
memoriam.
And Zach. And in memoriam, he, I don't know, he's not dying, so that's the good news. He is no longer here, but like I said on... just derailing our conversation. William says JT is boyishly handsome. Congratulations, JT. You're an attractive. You're an attractive little boy, whatever that means.
Yes. So okay.
That feels illegal. Okay. We did say goodbye to Zach, and as Braden said on that podcast earlier today, there are going to be some significant changes coming here on the 440 Podcast Network in between now and the beginning of the season. The good news for you, the viewer, is fret not. They are all going to be things that propel 440 into the future. Some exciting new programming notes. You're going to still be getting all of the shows that you love. So don't worry about that. It's just newer, bigger, better. That's the nature of sports media. Always changing, always shifting, but we always strive to move in the right direction. Like I said on that show, by the way, about Zach leaving, it is sad for us because we lose him to the, JT, you know this. Zach, until 10 seconds ago, a very, very big critic of the mainstream local beat writer group. He thought the big bad local media sucked at asking questions, were wasting their time going to the facility. And now he's texting us saying, what's the schedule to go to the facility? I want to get on over there. So, how the mighty have fallen. He's become the villain. He's become the villain.
You either die a hero or you see yourself live long enough to become the villain. Now instead of getting up in our DMs and saying, ask Peter Skoronsky if he's seen himself in Madden and how ugly he looks, he can just
ask your own freaking questions.
He can ask him himself.
Ask your own questions, Zach.
Yes.
Gosh.
But we wish him the best of luck. So
we do wish him the best of luck. Okay, we'll get on with our show here. Let's start with some practice notes, JT. And I guess we can go chronologically. So I'll start with Wednesday. I'll give the good news first, and then you can deliver maybe some bad news from today. On Wednesday, it was a pretty mundane practice. It certainly is a come down in the preseason training camp period of the year when you get through a week of joint practices and then it goes back to regular old practices. Things feel real quiet. I don't know if you felt the same way out there today, JT. Just very chill as compared to what we experienced last week. The offense on Wednesday was impressive, was promising, as I talked about with Braden on a football show earlier today. We felt like the scheme was getting guys to the places they need to be. And the particular standouts, I thought Will Levis had a good day, an up and down day, but overall certainly positive. Tyler Boyd, I tweeted about him, and I'm curious to ask you about how he did today in a minute, JT. Tyler Boyd looked fantastic on Wednesday, easily the best practice from him in two-tone blue that I have seen so far. He had, I think, 3 off the top of my head. Yeah, 3 really big impact plays. And it wasn't just like, the typical slot. He's going to sit down on the line to gain and fall forward just in the short intermediate area of the field, the center of the field. No, he was working from every level. One of the plays was up the sideline in the deep area. One was across the middle in the intermediate area of the field. He was winning from most positions on the route tree. They were having him run many different routes. And so while he's going to be lined up primarily in the slot this year, I don't know how you feel about this, JT. I think if I had to bet on one Titans receiver to be the most maybe fantasy relevant in September, Tyler Boyd might be my pick, especially with the specter of DeAndre Hopkins not being out there. I think that his ability combined with his familiarity with this Brian Callahan offense, which we can't overlook, is going to lend itself really significantly early to Will Levis. We always talk about who's the safety blanket. I think it's Tyler Boyd.
Yeah, I agree too. That's what I noticed, not to get too ahead of us, but I feel like this is as good of any time to chime in that it looked very much the same today. If there was one wide receiver out there today that looked like he had a genuine good connection where they were on the same page, it was Tyler Boyd with Will Levis. He continued to look really, really good out there and was a very pleasant surprise getting him back. And, something that we maybe have been missing with just kind of Treylon Burks, NWI, and Calvin Ridley out there. Getting Tyler Boyd back, I think, brings back an element of this offense that we hadn't seen in a long time, which is the familiarity already with Brian Callahan. Not having to work through the kinks of a new offense. Someone who
kind
already
of a rhythm,
knows,
right? An actual
exactly, a little bit of a rhythm. And I think that was on display. And so with how that is translating to the field, I do agree with you that much like how there were games last year where Jamar Chase and T. Higgins were both down for the count, Tyler Boyd stepped up. I definitely could see, especially in the early goings, like you said, September, in those week 1 through 4, especially before the bye week. I feel like the first month there, it may be a lot of Tyler Boyd as Will Levis still tries to get his connection right with Calvin Ridley. DeAndre Hopkins comes back. It may come down to if they start to find that they have trouble moving the ball down the field, it very much might become a possibility that Brian Callahan just simply goes, all right, Tyler, get out there, just run the things that we know works and just keep feeding him.
Just make it happen, Tyler.
Just make it work.
Yeah.
And so I think that's something that is reassuring and, like I said, a pleasant surprise because DeAndre Hopkins is that safety blanket for Will Levis. Oh, Calvin Ridley in his absence looks like he's getting on the same page. Well, no, maybe it's just Tyler Boyd because he knows the system really, really well.
Yeah, I would still. So our original take was DeAndre Hopkins would be that guy because of his established chemistry with Levis last season. If he hadn't missed time, I probably would still lean him. But because he's still TBD on the first game or two, and because he's missed this training camp period, I do lean it's Boyd right now. Ridley did look good on Wednesday, by the way. Certainly worth mentioning that he made a couple of big plays. You know who else made a couple of big plays? My man, Bryce Oliver. Bryce Oliver still got the juice. 2 big plays. One was a bomb touchdown. Who did he torch? I think it was Elijah Molden. Beat him one-on-one outright down the field with, I believe, Malik Willis aired it out to him. Don't quote me on that. Pretty sure one of the backups. So that was cool. Good for him. I can't wait to talk way too much next offseason about. Don't worry, they've got Bryce Oliver. He's been cooking for a year. Don't worry about it. You don't need NWI anymore. It's Bryce Oliver time. We were talking on Tuesday's show, JT, you and I, about how the thought experiment, if they are at any point missing DeAndre Hopkins and Treylon Burks, what becomes of the outside receiver? Because it's not, given their histories, not unreasonable, not crazy to think you might spend a couple of games, worst case scenario, God forbid, without both of those guys due to injury. What's the plan? Number one, the plan is NWI. And I think this is a great way to illustrate to folks the importance of NWI. I will say this feels like the first season in his career that Titans fans are legitimately pleased with and maybe even excited about NWI being on their roster. They toiled for that's been 3 years of NWI. They have been broken mentally. They're finally coming around.
Imagine that the wide receiver 4 gets to be the wide receiver 4 or 5 gets to be the wide receiver 4 or 5.
Right.
Isn't
and
that
he's
crazy?
good at it. He's quite good at that
he's
job.
Very good.
He's not good at the wide
job.
receiver 1 or 2 job, but he is quite good at the 4 or 5 job. And most importantly, he's like the flex tape commercials where the crazy guy, what's his name? Shoot. The guy, the owner of Flex Tape. We know what I'm talking about.
Phil Swift.
Thank you. Phil Swift. Just smacking that ish on everything. You can fix anything with a little flex tape or a little flex seal or a little flex glue, all the millions of probably carcinogenic items they're selling. He's the flex tape of this team. NWI, I've heard him referred to as like the Nissan Altima of this team, which first of all, rude. Second of all, I think it's underselling what he does.
Is he like a Honda CRV?
No, that's better, but I think it's still rude. I think he should be the flex tape of this team because
what car is he then? What is a reliable go-to car if not a Honda CRV? I feel like that is like CRV, that is like your soccer mom, get the kids to practice, get them home. Yeah. Well, no, those break down a lot.
Oh, do they? Okay.
Well, Ford's found on the road dead, so they're always breaking down.
My first car was a Ford and it recently broke down. So I hate that is confirming.
There you go. But the best ability is availability. And I feel like NWI, sorry to get off on.
No, you're right.
On a tangent
comparisons.
NWI to car, but I think it's true. What you're saying, like he's the most like death taxes NWI. He's the inevitability.
We need to ask Nick what car he is. Nick, how would you describe your game as a car? And then if he says like Maserati, we'll be like, you're lying. What do you actually mean? So, but my ultimate point here is if and when they need another X, he's the third X. If and when they need another guy to slide into the slot, like for significant snaps in the game, I think it's going to be NWI. If and when they need somebody available and healthy, gosh, we're also banged up. Historically speaking, that person has been NWI. And I'm not saying he's Teflon Nick. He can't be broken, but he is been super available and he knows all of the positions. He's familiar with the team. Like he's a coach's dream. He's like a teacher's pet, not in a derogatory sense, but the person you lean on when you need him. That's Nick Westbrook-Kine. So I don't know how I got on that tangent besides the fact, it was all of this to say Treylon Burks almost got hurt on Wednesday and he went down, almost caught a touchdown, was going to be a really impressive catch. And I thought he caught it, but people were saying he didn't. Doesn't matter whether he caught it or not. It's a practice. What does matter is he fell on his hip, as he is wont to do when he catches the ball. He falls awkwardly. I believe, if I'm not mistaken, he was asked about that today. Brian Callahan was, JT. Like, hey, why does Treylon fall funny? And I'll let you explain what the response was there in a second. But he does do this. He tends to fall unnecessarily, and he keeps falling on his hip. And he got up, he was on the ground in pain, and you're like, oh, here we go. Did JT and I speak this into existence on Tuesday? He gets up, kind of walks it off, then walks in a little bit early with trainers. Back out there today, which is a good report. And all I have to say on that front is it is quite bad that Treylon Burks continues to fall down unnecessarily and continues to get hurt throughout his career. That part, no bueno. What is good, and I think a fair credit to him, is that it's been a little bit now, and double hand knock on every piece of wood you can find. It has been a little bit now since he's dealt with a significant injury, and yet he has suffered a couple of nicks and tweaks and stuff like yesterday. I just think back to a year or 2 years ago. You see stuff like yesterday at practice, him going down and hurt and walking funny and limping hard, and then he would disappear for a week or 2 or 3 or a month. Recently, he's been shaking that off. He's been playing through it. He's been practicing through it, like an NFL player does. That is good. That's a credit to him. And hopefully he is a little bit, I guess what I'm ultimately trying to get at here is maybe he's a little bit tougher now. Maybe he's a little bit more durable than he used to be. Maybe his new body composition this offseason is a part of that. And my last recommendation for him is maybe he needs to go to the Tua Tagovailoa school of martial arts falling. Is that something we can enroll him in? Do the Titans have that in the budget?
I mean, that was something that Brian Callahan specifically brought up today.
He brought up the falling.
He did. He's like,
Okay.
Tua also practiced falling as well. But he said,
sign this man up, please. Let's do it yesterday.
Brian Callahan definitely said, like, it's something that is coachable, but at the same time, he wasn't exactly too worried about it. He does note that it is kind of funny how when Treylon does continue to fall down, it's on the same hip in the same exact spot. And so that was the reason why he was hurt, is because
I don't know if funny is the right word for that. It's rather concerning, but yes.
It's interesting that he's continues to fall on the same exact spot in more awkward ways every single time. And so, like you said, the bottom line, though, is that he continues to get up and get back, which is a stark contrast to what we saw last season, which is good to see. So, I mean, right now, for better or for worse, like, we do not have to live out that possibility of missing both Treylon Burks and DeAndre Hopkins, because then the wide receiver room gets really, really barren in a hurry. At least having Treylon gives you a little bit of peace of mind in that wide receiver room.
We know they're going to play the starters this weekend, which insinuates Treylon Burks will be out there.
Mm-hmm.
How do we feel about that? What's the temperature on that? How comfortable we are? Is Treylon Burks going to play a quarter? And if so, are we okay with that? I guess it's a necessary evil, and you got to play the game.
It has to happen, right?
Yeah,
like,
but
I don't think they can let, especially since he hasn't gotten that much with the run with the ones. Like, I think, he needs to be out there, considering that DeAndre Hopkins still might miss time, and he will have a big role to play in that first game against Chicago. I think he has to be out there as much time as a Tyler Boyd, as a Calvin Ridley, as any of those other guys are going to be out there. And, there's no point, like, it's a risk, yes, but it's a risk, like you said, that you have to take, because you employ him to play football, go play football,
Yeah,
like that.
That is in fact what they're paying him to do. That's true. Jake in the comments asking, as a fan base, how should we react if Tyler Boyd has a better statistical year over Ridley? I will give a more reasonable answer than you probably are looking for. It entirely depends on the context. So if Calvin Ridley's efficiency numbers are high, he has a 900 to 1,100 yard season and scores 8 touchdowns in similar fashion to last year. And Tyler Boyd just went off and had a 1,200 yard, 8 to 10 touchdown season. And he was that security blanket all year. He was the chain mover all year. He has one of his healthiest years to date. And while he's not tearing it up downfield, the role that he plays as a receiver, he is just tearing up zones like that. Then fine. Cool. Great. You got enormous value out of a 1-year contract veteran deal. If Tyler Boyd has 800 yards and 6 touchdowns on the year, and Calvin Ridley did worse, and it was a year of, man, can you believe how different the game would have been if Will Levis had simply connected with Calvin Ridley? Man, can you imagine if Calvin had gotten his foot in there? Man, could you imagine if Calvin hadn't dropped that ball on that key 4th down in the 3rd quarter? Then obviously I don't have to tell you how to feel about that. That would be a significant concern for the amount of money you're spending on Calvin Ridley. Okay, Kenneth says in the comments, okay, JT, Easton is giving us the positive spin. Not true. I'm not giving you a positive spin. I'm telling you what happened on Wednesday, which offensively was largely positive. But Kenneth asks, now tell us how every reporter is talking once again. Paint the picture for us.
Yeah, I mean, it was not a good day for Will Levis. In any aspect, I would say, like, besides like 2 or 3 good throws where he connected with Tyler Boyd, and then on their one red zone opportunity, I think the second time around, he finds Calvin Ridley in the back of the end zone about 15 yards out. Calvin Ridley makes an exceptional play to haul that ball in. So that was probably the play of the day for both of them. However,
was it a bad pass or just an impressive play?
I think it was more so like Calvin was running to the end there, and Will puts it a little bit behind him. Calvin does a good job to like turn around and catch it like that.
Body control, right?
Yeah,
okay.
Body control was the big part of that catch, and it was very impressive. But that's not saying much, because Calvin Ridley did Calvin Ridley things. Like, that's the play of the day, because nothing else really happened, because they could do nothing else. Like, the defense once again continues to get after the quarterback, and I'm not necessarily sure that's an offensive line thing. More so like the difference between last year's conversation about, man, this defense continues to get home against against the quarterback, they must be really good. Versus this year is I think this defensive line is just really good. Like instead of getting Arden Key to just continually get sacks off one person, you're getting like a bunch of guys just consistently sharing the love there. You're getting
You're telling me the
sacks.
whole offensive line stinks. It's not just one of them that stinks. That's what you're telling me.
That's what I'm saying right now. I mean, I believe I counted
Gotcha.
sacks from both Jeffrey Simmons, Harold Landry, Jack Gibbons got in there. Khalid Duke ended up getting one as well, of all people. So it was.
That's what I was going to ask. If it was the edge, the interior, it sounds like it's kind of coming from all over the place.
It's coming from all over the place. I know JC Latham for sure lost a rep against Khalid Duke, which allowed him to get into the backfield. The new guy they signed, Abdullah, was able to get into the backfield as well and tip the pass on. So it's not just on the ones, but like that. Abdullah was able to tip a pass for Malik Willis, which was taken for an interception by Amani Hooker. This defense continues to just get home, which causes problems for an offense trying to get in sync. And Will Levis, who needs to still get in sync with his wide receivers here and, processing all of his reads, looking at everywhere he's going on the field. It's really hard when 3 seconds in, he's getting absolutely collapsed in that pocket. And so, between that and then also Will Levis just didn't look good throwing the ball whatsoever today. It felt a little off is the vibe that I continued to get throughout all of practice today. Whether it was a throwaway or he was attempting to go downfield, it was off. The ball, when he was throwing it, it looked a little high. Like I was saying, like he's kind of like lobbing it like a mortar a little bit sometimes on those throws he was throwing outside. Whether that he was trying something, I hope not, but like it just did not look like the Will Levis that I've seen for a majority of camp. And I think it's interesting to note that on those deeper ball plays, we continue to see them not have a lot of success. And I wonder if that's to do with him kind of reining it in a little bit more for how Brian Callahan wants to run this offense, or it's just, they're not getting on the same page. But yeah, not a good day for the offense, not a good day for Will Levis specifically, though.
Interesting. So I have a couple of questions. Did you see any visible frustration from him or from his coaches, from his receivers? What was it did you notice timing issues, or the timing felt weird to you? Was he holding on to the ball too long? Any of that resonate or not really?
I think the latter two that you bring up there, because this was noticeable enough for someone in the media, I believe it was John Glennon, to ask Brian Callahan. It looked like Will was kind of leaving the ball up there today. What's going on with there? And Brian Callahan didn't really have much to say on it. He said you'd have to ask him about that. Like that was basically the extent of what Brian Callahan told us. Now I will say, like, if it was anything, it felt like a timing or, staying in the pocket a little bit too long because of just how kind of battered the offensive line was getting today. I think that's exactly where Will Levis would start to get some of those timing issues if he's being rushed, not being able to work through his progressions, not being able to throw exactly being rushed on all of that stuff is probably where my best guess goes to on why Will is having such a hard day. But still, I mean, some of the things we saw from him last year just didn't even seem to really be clicking today.
Interesting. So the question becomes, and another way for us to kind of wrap up our discussion from this training camp preseason portion of the year, where are you at today? We talked pre-training camp, what we wanted to see from Will Levis, what was important to us, concerns we had. Where are we today on his camp and what we expect going forward? What's your concern level? What do you make of Levis heading into 2024?
If we're doing concern level, I would still put it at a 6 or 7. I have not been convinced whatsoever that he is the guy for this team. I think he's flashed some things, but I think we wanted to see him. I think we can all agree that we haven't seen him put together like a consistent week. It's been up, down, up, down, up, down. We have not seen a lot of consistency with Will Levis throughout all training camp. I think that's fair to say. And
has there been a single dominant practice? I'm sitting here racking my brain.
Right? It seems like so.
There've been good practices.
There's been good, but nothing dominant where he's looked like everything is shaken out and working. And so that brings me to the conclusion, while yes, maybe it's a little extreme saying 6 or 7, and I'm confident he's not the guy. Okay, point me to where there's been that dominant display, or at least consistent display of being the guy in, kind of managing the offense efficiently to the point where you can prove that to me. And I think that's what we set out to do in training camp. And I kind of am still, after, a month and a half basically of asking this question, I think, going into this final preseason game and probably week 1, I think I'm still going to be asking myself that question. Like the answer to it is that we don't have an answer. And I think that's the most frustrating part.
I think it's totally fair. I answered this question at length on a football show earlier today, so I won't rehash all of it. I agree pretty much with everything you said. For me, and I've had like our friend Danny Kelly over at The Ringer, texting with him earlier this week, talking about Levis. And, when the line of questioning is, what are we thinking going in based on training camp? What are we thinking going into the year? My honest answer is I just don't feel comfortable evaluating him based on the camp. I am neither high nor low. I am still undecided like you are. I think that he's a gamer. I think he's the kind of player that you really can't evaluate until we get to the games. And we've had too many examples in the recent past of players looking really good or really bad in August and it not translating, and there not really being a super tangible thing to point to as to why. I'm old enough to remember last year, CJ Stroud, his first preseason game, he played like 7 snaps or threw 7 balls. It was very limited and he looked terrible. And we spent a week talking about, man, this guy might suck. This guy might stink at football. And then he had one of the most dominant rookie seasons we've ever seen. I'm not saying, well, don't worry, guys. Levis hasn't been great, but he's going to turn it on when we get. No, it may look exactly the same when we get to September. It may look worse. I just am not ready to put my finger on it, I think is ultimately what it is. And some folks may see that as optimistic deflection. I really don't think it is.
And that's where,
I've got no read. I've got no read. It's been hard to track.
I put it at a 6 or 7, right? Because there's that concern level that we don't have the read after we said the only thing we want to come out of here is that we know or not if this is actually going to work.
Bingo.
And we still don't.
I remember that. I remember that episode, right? We said it was the last episode before training camp. We're like, we need to see this from Levis like in the first week. And if I had to go back to that version of you and me and answer that question for us, my answer today is I don't think we had that question answered. I don't think we came close to having that question answered. Yeah,
I agree. And that's why the concern, like, it's going to be interesting because I think right now, and I just don't know, just bringing the question a little further, it's like, does it have to still do with this offense figuring it out? Is it really just because this Denard Wilson defense is going to be that good? And there's so many unknowns that we can't see until they play a full game of 60 minutes of football is when we're going to finally be able to start answering that. And that's a little frustrating, but it's kind of the truth that we have to deal with.
Bottom line, I am essentially in the same place on Will Levis that I was in June, in May, in April, which is, I don't know. Let's see. Let's find out. There's a lot of reasons to be excited, but I do not know. Yep. Okay, let's move on to some players to keep an eye on as the Titans head to New Orleans this weekend for their third and final preseason game of the year. We went through our final 53-man rosters on Tuesday, which was us lying to the good people because we've both changed them since then. They weren't quite final. They were close to final. Let's start with, let's just go ahead and get the offensive line question out of the way. I texted you yesterday, and it was less than 24 hours after we had finished that episode talking about our 53-man rosters, and I said, I've already changed my mind on a bunch of these guys. I can't decide. I'm talking to people. I'm allowing people's opinions to sway my opinion. I don't know. My head. I'm in a blender over here, JT. Let me give you what I've settled on as of right this moment. And again, it might change before tomorrow, but we'll see. In my original Tuesday edition, I had them keeping 10 linemen. And besides the starters, I had them keeping Brunskill, Rupchich, Simmons, Duncan, and Spencer. I am begrudgingly keeping 10, although in my gut, I feel like they're going to keep 9. I just can't decide on who to cut. I think it's down to 11 guys fighting for either 9 or 10 spots. Let me simplify it that way. I don't think there's any question. They're keeping the starting 5. And then I've not met a person that thinks they're not keeping Brunskill or Rupchich, right? We discussed Brunskill as potentially a surprise cut because of money, but he's just too good. And he's the direct backup center. So I think that math has changed in the last week or two. So there's 7 right there. Starting 5, Brunskill, Rupchich. And then I think there are 4 guys fighting for the last spots. I think it's Garon Christian. Wait, no, just kidding. It's 5 guys fighting for those last spots. 5 guys fighting for 2 or 3 spots. Yep. It's Garon Christian, Jalen Duncan, Latavius Simmons, John Ojukwu, Leroy Watson. Do we agree on that much?
Yeah, and I'll take it one step further on my end, and I'm going to say 2 of those guys, I feel like you can take 2 of those guys out because they know they're already on this team. And I think it's the 2 tackles that they're going to keep. I think they're going to keep Jalen Duncan, and I think they keep Garon Christian are the 2 other guys that I lean
that way as well, which means that means you're keeping 4 total tackles, right? The starting 2, and then your backups are Garon Christian and Jalen Duncan. That checks out. That means John Ojukwu is out. Does that mean Leroy Watson is for sure out?
So this is where I also have changed my mind.
He'd be a 5th tackle.
Okay. I think that Leroy Watson is out, mostly because I think that they can afford to take a flyer on either Latavius Simmons, who has looked pretty good, or a Cole Spencer as an upside guy over Leroy Watson.
Out on Spencer now. I had him in, by the way. Spencer. I think Spencer's officially not on the team, and I think I'm realizing my personal biases for Cole Spencer. He's a practice squad guy. He's a quintessential practice squad guy, in my opinion.
So then I think we're building the puzzle pieces on air.
Yeah, we're talking it through. We're talking it through,
but we are building the puzzle pieces of what will be essentially these 5 backups: Brunskill, Rupchich, Jalen Duncan, Garon Christian, and then probably Latavius Simmons as your 5 backup guys if they keep 10.
So that's what I came down to before our episode, and that's what I was going to come in here and say. Yes, it's still Brunskill and Rupchich. Yes, Duncan and Christian are the swing tackles, and then Latavius Simmons is your 10th guy. But the thing, and I'd be content with that if there wasn't still a little birdie in my head, just really more a woodpecker banging the front of my noggin. It won't leave me alone. I don't think they keep 10. I think they keep 9. And I can't figure out who. Does that mean Latavius Simmons? Thanks for being the best backup lineman potentially that this team saw through 2 preseason games, but we have to cut you. And maybe here's where we tie this into the top half of the show.
What's the reasoning behind what changed for you that you're moving to 9 instead of 10? Is there somewhere else on the roster that when going back, that you look, they have to have another guy somewhere?
No, I went back. So I went back through some team records from the Titans and for the Bengals and for past Denard Wilson teams. And I saw a lot of 9s and not 10s in terms of linemen kept. Keeping an entire 10 I don't think it's super common to keep 10 backups, but it's not, I think it's slightly less common than it is common, if that makes sense. I don't know. If you told me like you kept too many linemen, dude, it was always going to be 9. Fine. Maybe I'm letting other people's opinions sway me too much on this because I am comfortable with those 10 we mentioned. Starters plus Brunskill, Rupchich, Simmons, Duncan, Christian. So I guess I'll go with that. But that leads us to our second. Well, actually, to tie that into the top of our show first, I think of the linemen, if we're asking who can really solidify their spot or lose their spot based on this final game, I think Latavius Simmons has to finish strong, which maybe not be fair to him because he's been so good through 2 games. I mean, for a backup, relatively, he's been impressive through 2 games. And I think he's the number 1 guy. The way they talk about Duncan, maybe he needs to avoid a disaster game, but the way that I almost said Bill Simmons, different Bill, Callahan talks about him, I just don't see them cutting him. And then Brunskill and Rupchich, I have no issue with. And then Garon Christian, we just know he's their third. That was the biggest slip of mine on the Tuesday show. I didn't really mention Garon Christian as an option. And then I went back and talked to some folks and realized, like, wait, he's their 3rd tackle. What am I talking about? He's definitely on the team. I just total overlook on my oversight on my part. So I think Latavius Simmons is the one fighting for that 10th spot, if I had to guess.
Yeah, I think I'm with you. I think Garon Christian.
Crap, I just remembered another thing that maybe changed my mind. Leroy Watson, they traded a 7th round pick for this guy. Does that not give you any pause? If they had just picked him up on waiver wire, I'd be fine here. But the fact that they traded for him, that he's got the Bill Callahan background,
and that's where I come back.
Tuesday, would it shock you if we found out he took Jalen Duncan's spot? Would that shock you?
I wouldn't agree with it, but no, it wouldn't shock me because once again, any combination could actually happen. And then we go back to my point when building an offensive line. Bill's going to go with the guys who have done it for him before in a pinch, right?
Yes.
And like, I think that's something that's not nothing. And like you just said, trading a 7th round pick for Leroy Watson is something that, Bill, it would be a really interesting. Yeah. Wouldn't it be super interesting if Bill just went to Rand is like, we got to get this guy, and they trade the 7th and then they end up cutting him. Like, I don't know if that happens now.
Those of you with us still, the handful of sickos still with us through this very tedious
descent into madness.
Yes. If you're in the comments on YouTube, give us your answer. Well, I think everybody on the planet agrees on the top 7. You got your 5 starters plus Brunskill and Rupchich. Whether you think they keep 2 more or 3 more, so 9 or 10 total, who are your final 2 or 3? Let us know in the comments. I think JT and I are agreeing on Simmons, Duncan, Christian, but we're not sure about Watson. And we're not sure if they keep 2 or 3 of them. So let us know in the comments what you think is going to happen. Now we can move on to the skill position players. And this is, I think, a good way of boiling it down. I talked to Braden about this today, and he kind of made me realize this. And so I said it on that show. I'll say it here. Between the skill positions, running back, receiver, tight end, we have had conversations about them potentially keeping an extra at all 3 of those positions. It's like, well, what if they keep a 4th running back? What if Son Haskins gets in there and they justify keeping 4? Hey, tight end, we really think they're going to keep 4 because DMR's looked fantastic, and they bifurcate the position by X and F or Y and F. And that would make a lot of sense to be 2 deep at each position. And then with receiver, it's like, well, they talk a lot about Mason Kinsey and that, they think there's upside there and versatility. DeAndre Hopkins potentially missing time. Maybe he becomes your 6th while you're still missing one of, DeAndre Hopkins is the 7th. It's not active. Ultimately, I think whatever happens, I'm pretty confident they only keep 1 quote unquote extra at one of the positions. I don't think you get 4 running backs and 4 tight ends. I don't think you get 7 receivers and 4 tight ends. So if the question then becomes which of the 3 skill positions is most likely, you rank them most likely to least likely to get an extra, I would rank them tight end, gap, running back, receiver. I think tight end is by far the most likely to get a 4th spot because of what DMR has done and because of the way that position is working for this team. And with running back, this is the part of the roster that I hate the most because I don't see any reason for Hassan Haskins to be on this freaking team. And yet people I talk to and just the vibes that I'm getting is that's going to be the thing that frustrates me most about this roster is that he's taking up a roster spot. It is nothing personal. It is not personal at all. As a special teams only guy, I just don't understand the need for it personally. How would you rank those in likelihood, JT? And what do you hope happens?
Yeah, so I'm with you that tight end is the most likely, and then there's a gap, and I'm gonna flip wide receiver and running back solely for the fact that DeAndre Hopkins, I think, is the main factor there for me. Justifying.
So the way you're talking, you seem, correct me if I'm wrong, it seems like you think it's a pretty decent chance Hopkins misses at least a game.
I mean, maybe, but like it's just been very quiet on that front, right? Sure. And I think that's why, they could go in. Now, I think neither of them are really likely because you look at the options that potentially could be that seventh wide receiver. You look at Kyrus Jackson. Okay, well, Kyrus Jackson probably will not play this week because of that knee injury. Mason Kinsey, he's probably going to be out there, but he's got a broken finger. So is that going to hurt him more than it helps him? Like, that's an interesting conversation. Kyle Phillips is hurt. So that really leaves you like, if none of those guys can really go, is it like Bryce Oliver that then you are justifying keeping? Like,
no. If Bryce Oliver makes this team, I will eat my hat. And I'm one of the foremost Bryce Oliver defenders. I feel like that's been made pretty clear. If he makes this team, I'll do backflips.
I mean, as Alex says, Bryce Oliver is a generated player name. If it wasn't for Easton's love for him, I wouldn't think he actually existed.
That's fair. Yeah.
That's why I really don't think. And so on the Haskins
thing, as much as I've talked about Bryce Oliver, by the way, I don't think I've ever once spoken to him. I couldn't say what he looks like. I just have watched him on the field.
He wears the number 80. But I think when you bring up Haskins, I think it's really interesting because for my article that's going to go up tomorrow on Broadway Sports Media, I'm writing the 3 players who I think have the most to gain or lose in this preseason game. Hassan Haskins is one of them. And because I think if he is going to justify his spot, one, we know what he can do on special teams. Last week, Brian Callahan said that he was a special teams demon. Like, apparently, he does special teams pretty darn good. That's something we know.
Big
that is known.
teams
What we don't know is that, can he actually be a plus player when it comes to running the ball?
Excuse me, teacher. I feel like I already know the answer to that question. You say we don't know. I feel like I know. I feel like I know.
You might. Yeah.
He's going to get a lot of run in this game, right?
He is.
It would be foolish not
and
to.
That's
right.
Kind
the
of
starters come out. It should be him the rest of the way. I think
it should, because we continue to see him fall behind in snap share behind Jabari Small, and we talk about Jabari Small and some other guys are already pre-cut. I mean, I would be shocked to see. I would expect Chestnut to get. I expect him to get a lot of run early-ish in the game after the starters. And then I would really like to see Hassan Haskins, because I think you have to see if he can even contribute in the run game to justify keeping him for special teams, is I think the biggest thing there.
Yeah, I agree. It's the last chance saloon for Hassan Haskins. They should give him a lot of opportunity to prove it if they are thinking about keeping him. I'm surprised by this in the comment. I guess maybe not, because we've not seen him. This part's fair. Alex Titan saying, what does Nick Vanette bring to the table? I've heard literally nothing about him all camp, but everyone talks like he's a roster lock. Yeah, that's fair. And we have talked about him like a roster lock. For one, he is your backup Y tight end, that traditional inline guy behind Josh Wiley. And in terms of what he brings to the table, he's a stalwart pro. He's a veteran player, knows what he's doing. He is a legitimate red zone threat, so he's not just going to be your glorified lineman, big boy, inline blocking all the time. He'll run routes as well. And I think that he's a decisively talented blocker. And so they're comfortable with him as their third tight end. I don't see anybody that, like, in terms of pushing him for that Y spot, Odukoya perhaps, but I continue to think he's unfortunately stuck in that 17th international spot purgatory. I don't know. I'd be just the way that they've talked about him, the way they've used him, and the way they've given him veteran rest. I'd be floored if they decided to cut him all of a sudden.
Yeah, I would agree. And so I think if you would have seen Thomas Odukoya be that guy, I think you wouldn't have signed Nick Vanette in the first place, right?
Bingo.
I think that's,
or you would have gotten him out there more in this camp and been like, well, go back and make sure, prove us that you need this job over. Like, let's see it.
Yes. I think for what Brian Callahan wants to run, especially in the run game, I think that's something that, why you've heard nothing about it is because it's a thankless job. He's a very solid contributor on the run blocking game, because he's like you said, that bigger body tight end that's going to basically be a glorified extra lineman and be able to push the defensive line with the offensive line. And so that's something that he has excelled at really, really well. I think he fits into this system a lot as well, because Brian Callahan, we know he likes to keep around like those gremlin little tight ends, like a Drew Sample or a Tanner Hudson or, CJ Uzama, all these guys who, what do they do best is the thankless jobs of pass blocking and run blocking, not exactly catching the ball.
Yep. Before we move on from offense, is there anything that Malik Willis can do in this game, in your opinion, to justify a roster spot? Can he win himself the third quarterback designation?
Okay. Throw for like 250 yards, maybe. I don't know. I hear
have an impressive regular season game. Gotcha.
Yeah, throw one touchdown. Has he thrown a touchdown?
No, it's
I
fair.
don't think
It's a fair bar.
Throw a touchdown.
Yeah, that's a fair
Everyone
bar.
else has thrown a touchdown or ran one in. Score points. Score something that isn't a field goal, and then maybe I will consider it. I think that's my bar.
Are you expecting that from him? Don't answer that question.
Nope, not answering it. Not answering that question.
Did we skip over any? So in summary, skill position players that need to put up or shut up. Hassan Haskins, easily number one. I think Mason Kinsey can make a significant case for himself if he has a vintage Mason Kinsey Hall of Fame preseason game.
With a broken pinky. If he does that with a broken pinky, that's...
Where were you for the broken hand Mason Kinsey game? He was showing me his broken pinky on Wednesday. It looks like it hurts. And then, I don't know. I mean, I think DMR can lock up his spot if he has another big game. If he finishes the 3 games still leading the Tennessee Titans pass catchers in all categories, then DMR, welcome to the squad. So that brings us to the defensive side of the ball. And just to be clear with folks, I haven't changed anything on my official lineup besides flipping Cole Spencer for Garon Christian on the offensive line side. Defense. Who comes to mind first? Maybe who you're writing about over at probablysportsmedia.com, JT, as a guy that is a put up or shut up, must win their spot or must not lose their spot this weekend.
He's been a topic of conversation for Titans podcasts alike this week. Rashad Weaver, I think, is a guy who needs to confirm his spot this week with a good game. We heard from Brian Callahan, and this is the first of a couple clips that I got from today talking about the edge position and what he's seen, specifically named Jalen Harrell, who he gave really high praise to in this clip, which you'll see. And then he's like, oh yeah, and also Rashad Weaver, which doesn't give me the greatest confidence.
No, I didn't see this.
However, Rashad Weaver has to continue what he does in the run defense game really well. And then he's got to get back to what we saw Rashad Weaver do in a pinch when he had to fill in last year, which was be able to get to the quarterback and make plays. Like that is something that we've seen from him, and why it's been a disappointing camp for him is because that just seems to have disappeared into thin air. Like Rashad Weaver, and we talked about him in OTAs and how he's kind of reconfigured his body and whatnot. I'm wondering if that's more of the
Aged
reason.
Poorly.
Like he's now more in that Arden Key role where he's lost some of that ability to bull rush and get to the passer. I'm not sure, but that's something. If he wants this roster spot over a Caleb Murphy or over insert player they go pick up on waiver, he needs to have a good game. And so here's what Brian Callahan had to say on the edge position, both Jalen Harrell and Rashad Weaver.
Two things. I mean, there's a run game part of it when they're rotating, the physicality, being able to set the edge and play physical in the run game. Both of those guys do that well. And then there's the pass rush part of it, is where they coming in to spell Arden and Harrell. And then what does that look like? Are they being productive? Obviously, Jalen's had production in the games, second quarterback. But so far, I've been really pleased with the way those guys have played. Jalen in particular. And we've really been really physical against the run in the games, which has been good to see. So I think we got a good mix of guys there in those 3 and 4 spots at the outside linebacker position.
So the most interesting part of that is how he goes, Harrell specifically, pause. Weave is strong.
You could hear what was happening
game.
in that pause, though. You could see it. You could see his brain actively going, what good thing can I say about Rashad Weaver? The run game. This guy has not gotten himself burnt in the run game that I've noticed. That is
and that's
good
between him and Caleb Murphy, right? And I think that's the crux of the argument. Do you justify this guy that maybe has a little bit more power in his rush, like a Caleb Murphy? You know, he's able to get to that quarterback a little bit more efficiently and effectively. Or do you keep the guy who has played in 33 games, started 3, looks more comfortable out there, especially in something like the run game where he knows where to be, outside of Caleb Murphy, who sometimes looks like he's absolutely lost out there when defending against the run. That's the difference that you have to do there. And so I think it'll be really interesting to see if maybe Caleb Murphy can, look a little bit more comfortable and be able to defend more effectively.
Or the Murphyites will be insufferable if he has a
or
big game.
Will Rashad
Mike Herndon, I'll have to block Mike Herndon. I will.
Or will Rashad Weaver actually be able to get to the quarterback? That's interesting. And I do think it was
I'm betting on? I'm betting on them both having a bad game and not doing anything. That's what I'm betting on.
That's probably the safe bet. I will say, though, today, in my clip that I got where I posted of the edge defenders getting some work in at practice today, Ben Bloom gave both Rashad Weaver and Caleb Murphy a compliment on their base. So, I don't know.
Hey,
can we just all be happy? Can we all be happy?
Big content guy. He knows how to feed the machine. We appreciate that from Ben.
Yeah.
So I'm very close to calling Rashad Weaver a microwave dinner, JT. You know why? I think this cat's pre-cooked. I think he's pre-cooked. I think that he's a warm body on the roster that they are going to be actively looking to replace at any moment. And I don't mean to be mean about that. It's just, Weave, you're a great quote. I enjoyed talking to you. I do. Let's get back into some anything, like a groove of any sort would be nice. Yeah. So I think he's on there for sure. Another one comes to mind is, and this, I need a heat check on this from you, JT. Am I wish casting when I say they could just keep 5 cornerbacks and Trey Avery could be cut. Am I just hoping too hard for that when I say that?
That's not exactly a heat check because it's kind of is. It kind of isn't. One, I think they keep 6 no matter what. 2,
so
I changed Trey Avery for Gabe Judy Lawley today. On my,
well, I thought you already. Oh wait, so you have them? Who you have them keeping? Garrett
and Gabe Judy Lawley.
I see.
And cutting Trey Avery is the decision I made today. Which is the other guy. The other guy I'm writing about in my article. So the 3 that I think have the biggest thing to gain or lose this week is Gabe Judy Lawley, Rashad Weaver, and Hassan Haskins are the guys who can make or break their spot. We got to talk to Gabe Judy Lawley today. Just kind of talking about his third, the preseason game, how he has looked in the first 2, what has he been able to develop and grow with here, and how important this game is as roster cut down day looms. And so here's what he had to say.
I think at the end of the day, go down on special teams, make some plays on special teams, show that I'm a well-rounded football player at the end of the day. But I think that, I showed growth and improvement every single day that I came out from each game also too. So it shows that with more time and the more opportunities I do have, I go out there and I do my job. So at the end of the day, I'm going to be proud of whatever happens because not many people get this opportunity. And I think that I definitely put my best foot forward. For sure.
So that was, I think, very interesting. He did kind of allude, and some of these guys, it's really interesting talking about, hey, do you have a good idea if you're going to be employed next week or not? That it's a weird time of year to do this.
That is strange, man.
But a lot of us were talking in the media workroom afterwards and getting the vibe that he may feel pretty confident that he has a spot on this roster, and it makes sense with the way he plays press man on the outside in Denard Wilson's defense. The problem is he's really bad in zone. So that's what I need. That's what I need. That's what I need to see
every time he's in zone.
From him this week. He says he continues to develop and improve every single preseason game. Let's see you step up and display you have some more versatility outside just being a man coverage guy. And I think that's the biggest thing we need to see from him in order to justify that, or just don't get as cooked as Trey Avery probably will get cooked this week. So
2 things, and I'm blurry again. This is a recurring issue. Is my camera dead? Am I cooked, chat? Help me out here. That's
the most thing you've said ever on the show.
It might be, actually. It might be. I did that for you.
Thanks.
There has to be 2 things true in the minds of the coaching staff in order to go with Guerra over Avery, or to keep 5 instead of 6, and the 5th being Gabe Judy Lawley. You have to be comfortable with the idea that Judy Lawley and Brownlee and naturally Awuzie and Snead are all outside guys, or all guys that can not play outside in the pinch, but play naturally outside. And in that case, then you say, okay, well, we've got McCreary as our slot guy, and Guerra will be the direct backup, and we maybe Brownlee is the flex direct backup. He's the swing inside out, because I am comfortable and hit with him in both spots. And then Guerra is your third. I don't know if they feel that way for sure about Brownlee in terms of comfortability outside in. I know they've played him outside in a lot. I don't know if that has been a born of necessity or preference. I don't know. I'm confident they keep 6. And as much as I'd like to change Guerra in, Avery out, I don't know. Maybe I will have my mind made up by this game. And if Avery gets torched again and again, then I'll pull the trigger.
The thing that we talk about with all these other guys that kind of goes unnoticed is how much Eric Guerra is used on special teams. And I think that is going to mean a lot when it comes down to roster cutdown day. And also, by that logic, also keeping maybe a Trey Avery and a Gabe Judy. You just don't, like you said there, you don't have a direct backup to Roger McCreary. If Roger goes down, you do not have anybody, if you don't keep Guerra, that can play inside. It'd be Brownlee, but yes. I agree with you that I think he can play it. I just question it. They have been playing him at both spots. Mm-hmm. They've been very much favoring. They've been favoring one side more than the other for sure, though.
Mm-hmm. The last question before we get out of here, and we've gone a little bit long. Any final thoughts on linebacker before we're inevitably wrong about this? I had 6 in my original on Tuesday. I'm down to 5. I think I think Gray gets put on a list.
I think he gets put on a list as well.
Here's the other
Which is
scenario
a
I could
weird
see
thing
happening.
to say.
I know,
He's just
like,
getting on a list.
right.
On a
That
list.
sounds like, like an FBI watch list. Like what? No, an injury list.
IR. Yeah.
Right. I could see Otis Reese unfortunately being cut and them keeping Williams and Gray. I don't know. I'll tell you this much. Gray isn't getting outright cut. He's either on a list or he's on the team. So yeah, I don't know. What I am confident of now is I think I was just being hopeful in the 6 thing. If they keep 6 linebackers, like I originally said, I'll be kicking myself for changing it. That just feels really heavy, man, doesn't it? 6 middle linebackers.
Yep, I agree.
Did you revise yours down to 5?
I did. I moved Gray to IR and kept 5. I think if you're looking for a battle there, it's Otis Reese versus Luke Gifford is the battle that's happening.
You still
there.
think Gifford has a chance to make the roster, huh?
I do. I think because if you're not keeping, like you said, if we're prioritizing other places in the roster, especially on your list, if you're keeping Eric Garror out, if you're keeping Hassan Haskins out, you need those special team guys, whether you like it or not. And
if Luke Gifford and Hassan Haskins make this team because they're special teams aces and other talented players don't, here's the take. If Hassan Haskins and or Luke Gifford is on this team and David Martin Robinson is not, I might jump off my roof. I might have to.
Okay.
I'm going to be furious if that happens.
Okay.
Would you not be furious about that?
No, I would. I don't know if I'm going to jump off a roof though. Like
into a bush. Don't worry about it.
Okay. I might go outside. I might go outside Ascension St. Thomas Sports Park and like start picketing, with a sign.
I will fall to my knees in a Walmart. I will crash through the lobster stand at the local Kroger if that happens. How about that?
Okay. Good deal.
All right. Well, that's the show, I think. I think we solved all the issues. I think now we have the roster 100% correct. So that's good. That's exciting to be correct a couple days out. JT, you and I will be back on Sunday evening doing our first actual day of reaction show after the Titans play. They'll wrap up and we will be on the air shortly. Similar to if you're a fan of the show from last season, similar to I think the timing of last year's shows, maybe a hair earlier because less to prep with not a real game going on. And then we will be back on Tuesday. We talked just to give people a peek behind the curtain. We're going to be doing the Take Purge take 2 at some point between the end of the preseason and the beginning of the season. Not sure when. I think it'll be next week. We might have a guest or two involved. It's going to be a great time. If you're not familiar with the Take Purge, essentially it's things that we want to get off, just get some takes off that are a little bit crazy, a little zany. We don't want to actually be personally responsible for them, but we do want to say them. And so it's one of the most fun episodes we do all year long. We steal it straight from our friends over at the Ringer Fantasy Football Show, but we know them, so it's okay. They won't hurt us. And it's a good time. So we'll do that next week, and then we might have a guest or two. It's always fun things we can do in the interim between the end of the season. And you know what? I totally forgot cut down day. So here's what's probably going to happen. Review show on Sunday, cut down reaction on Tuesday, probably Take Purge on Thursday is what we'll end up doing. And it'll be a pretty stacked week for the dead period of Titans football. Just to let folks know, the Titans will be off the following weekend, but we will still have media availability of some kind next week. So we'll let you know what that is when we know it. And then I believe they'll be on to their regular season practice schedule the following week leading up to week 1. So that will be exciting. And we'll be covering all of it for you here on the Hot Read podcast and with the 440 network. Of course, a reminder, tune in on Monday to a football show with Braden Gall and somebody else. Spoiler, it will not be me. So find out who it is. And there'll be some information on what's going to be changing on the 440 podcast network for the 2024 Titans season. We got football right around the corner. Until Sunday, enjoy your weekend. Make sure you're following us on social media at Hot Read Pod on TikTok, Twitter, and Instagram. For producer JT, I'm your host, Easton Freeze. We'll talk to you after preseason week 3.